You want a huge night for the Washington Commanders brings in a bunch of new players, a bunch of college team captains, and possibly a bunch of new starters. Plus, we got to talk to Jaden Daniels for the first time. It's been busy. It's late. Let's have a podcast. What up, everybody? It's JP Finley. It's Beltway Football. We're brought to you by Oarsman Automotive of Virginia. We ride with them. Want you to do the exact same thing. You can check them out online at oarsmanva.com. Me and the big man. It is midnight on Friday. It's 11:58 Friday night. It's still my sister's birthday. Mitch's brother's birthday was still yesterday or 2 days ago. Big man, all right, our eyes are a little glazed. It was a long, long night. We also got the added bonus of Beltway traffic in the middle of the night, which was just terrific. How are you? You doing all right?
Doing well. Excited for this podcast. We have a lot to get through today, but today was a big day in Commanderland. We got a nice little roundout of what Adam Peters and his front office is looking to do. Plus, got to meet Jaden and learn a little more about him.
Yeah, so I think we start there, right? Listen, for everybody that wants long pods, this is about to be one. Me and the big man are going to lock in for what is probably an hour in the middle of the night, but that's fine.
And also, listen, at the end of this pod, if you stick around, we're going to play Jaden Daniels' full press conference, and then afterwards, Dan Quinn met with the media as well. So it'll be Jaden Daniels' presser and then Dan Quinn's media scrum. So lots and lots of Commander stuff coming your way.
A lot. And if you want to watch me and the big man, you can watch it on my YouTube at JP Finley DC. All right. Let's start with the Jaden presser. I thought he was really impressive. I thought he handled everything well. At one point, it was people that were trying to get the are you QB1? I thought that was unnecessary, and I thought he handled that really well. He's like, man, I got to learn the playbook, which is just such a easy way of shifting out of that. I love that all he said is, I'm here to compete, and we'll see what happens. We all probably know what's actually going to happen. I think he's going to be the week one starter, but we'll see. There's a lot to happen between April 26th and September 8th or whatever. I just thought he was cool. I loved the story he told about as a little boy, he had a handwritten sign, I want to play in the NFL. His family was there. His agent was there. I got to talk to him. Whatever the emoji gate was not. Were there some questions in the conversation? Sure. But what we now know, watching that kid smile and embrace his childhood dream and talk repeatedly about how he's fulfilling a childhood dream, all that is in the rear view. It was largely nonsense. We're here now. I think he's a stud. You think he's a stud. Peters talked about it. DQ talked about it. There's the passer is first and foremost that I think is most important because that's how you win in the NFL, and he's great at that. Then there's the runner, which helps separate everything, and it was fun kind of hearing DQ talk about that. And then there's the person, which we know how vitally important that is in the locker room. We don't need to name names, but we've seen early draft picks that were not necessarily bad people, but were not the right, not even just early draft picks, early and late, all of them. We're not the right people to lead in the locker room. And that doesn't have to be an in-your-face leadership. It doesn't have, you can be quiet and still be a leader. They never hit that right. Honestly, of our going from Robert to now, I think the guy that had the best off-field stuff was probably Colt McCoy. Alex at the top of the list. But then Cole, I thought Sam kind of had that stuff. But this kid seems to have all of it. It's too early. Who knows? We haven't seen him throw an interception or get hit big, but he seems to be the total package. He's a dynamic human. With the way these guys, Peters, Quinn, even Josh Harris, the way they talked about him, I get it. I understand why there was no hesitation on him being the pick. Peter said he was a top pick on the draft board. I believe him. I think, Mitch, there is never, not never, but it's been a long time since people should be this excited about the quarterback position and a rookie that they're going to develop. They have organizational alignment. I've talked about that repeatedly. I thought the Jaden presser was awesome, and we rate pressers, and it doesn't mean anything when they get to but whatever hesitation some people had, you still have them. God bless you. Good luck. Go mow your lawn. I think it's full steam ahead.
Yeah, I mean, listen, talk about him as a dude, and he walked into that presser with this $1 million smile across his face, gave Adam Peters a big hug, and kind of worked his way to the podium. That's the kind of thing that you're not faking. You're not faking. And you talked
Totally.
about the poster on his wall. We got a chance to talk to Jaden's dad a little bit. He was telling these stories about how every year they would growing up, they would sit down and watch the draft, and Jaden would talk about wanting to be an NFL pro, and his dad was helping talk it into existence, but also talking about, hey, what are you going to do to be better than the next guy? What are you doing to be that guy who's gonna make it? And it's just kind of a heartwarming story. I'm sure every draft pick used to watch the
Yeah.
draft with their parents, but listening to him tell the story just was really cool. To me, what stood out the most about the presser, that I liked the most about the presser, was we talked about how he's kind of improved year after year after year in college. And I think on yesterday's pod, if we told the story, and if not, I'll just repeat it quickly. He asked LSU to change the access
Yeah.
to the football department, so that he could come in early and stay late and didn't have to work within normal operating hours, because he wanted the ability to to watch film when he wanted to, and get some extra mental reps in. But he also talked today about how he started incorporating virtual reality, so he could get more extra reps in, different reps. They weren't physical reps on his body, and how he would bring in his receivers to watch film with him as well. For a kid who gets better year after year, and to see him seeking out different tools to continue improving, to me is impressive, because it'd be so easy to sit back on your laurels as a Heisman Trophy winner, or a guy who's leading one of the top football programs in the country. But he didn't do that. He went out and he wanted to take that next step, and he seeked the he seeked the what's I don't know what's the past tense?
Sought.
Thank you, thank you. It's
Definitely
late.
not sucked.
It is late, everybody. But he sought the newest, latest, technology, and all these different things. I love that for him, because I think it shows his eagerness to continue to improve and get and enhance his game. And to me, that speaks volumes about the football player Jaden, and the man that he is.
Well, and he said, "I'm not a finished product. Like there's a
Yeah,
lot more improving for me to do." And that is what I've always thought, and what I've been saying for a while, for anybody that's like safe pick, blah blah blah. And I just love that he's embracing that. And in no way, now listen, he's number 2 overall pick. He just won the Heisman Trophy. You play good at LSU, it matters. But he did not seem entitled. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
he's got a healthy ego, I'm sure, and like whatever. He's dressing well and wearing sunglasses, but dude, you want your quarterback to have swag. Like if a you get a center or something that is walking around like that, it stands out. But a quarterback, like, you're supposed to do that. You know what I mean? Like I really liked everything with Jaden. I thought when I asked Harris, Josh Harris. I mean, he was in Ashburn last night when the Sixers were playing at home in the playoffs, and I asked him, I was like, "Does this matter differently because you grew up with this team?" And he's like, "It's a big deal. This matters for the city. It matters for me. It matters for everything." And I think that's true and accurate and important.
and to that point,
I want to get into the weeds, but like the big picture here is Jaden, and I think the big picture is really, really bright.
yeah, and Josh Harris was in the draft room, and I know people were,
I don't
iffy
care.
about having the owner. I don't care about that, because he just spent $6 billion on the team. He can do it. But one bit from Josh Harris talking to us, somebody asked him, like, "Hey, is Jaden Daniels your QB1 week 1?" And without missing a beat, he's like, "Dude, that's not my call." He's like, that's for Dan Quinn. That's for the staff to figure out, what they're going to do. And I just think that that's an important
It was
distinction.
such a gotcha attempt.
Of course, that's what it was. But he also was on
We've
top
all
of it enough that he didn't bite. He easily could have bit, and it could have become a thing, but he didn't. And
savvy.
Yeah,
And some of
savvy.
that might be owning sports teams, right? Like he knows how to react as a fan, or just in the excited moment of it all. He's like, dude, that's for the coach. Like I'm trying to figure out a stadium, man. All right, so good day, lot to be happy about. I think we get into the draft, specific picks, everything, but I kind of want to start at the top here. So they go into this, they have 36 and 40, and people are really excited. And 36, there's all these options, right? And there's options that fans were fired up for, corners, tackles, whatever. And then they take Johnny Newton, who was Defensive Player of the Year out of Illinois, a D tackle. They've got Allen and Payne. They have all these other holes. They have Allen and Payne, and people online were like freaking out. Then I knew people would freak out by that. I also understand it. Payne and Allen are playing a ton of snaps. Last year, they both played, I think, north of 75% of snaps. I think it was like 74 and 79. Ideally, you spread that out a lot more. John Allen's going to be 29. Payne's probably 26. He was young when he was drafted. But, like, those dudes are better probably when they're playing like 65% of snaps. They haven't gotten the production they want out of Phil Mathis. He's been hurt, whatever. Ridgeway helps, but he's a bit piece.
Well, real quick, before we get
Yeah.
into the pick by pick thing, the one
I gotta. This is not pick by pick.
Go for it. Okay, then
Not
go.
where I'm going.
All right.
So fans are kind of flipping out that they took another D tackle, and then at 40 they trade back, and at that point people are flipping out, especially because they traded back with Philly, which is a division rival, and one name that a lot of people like was Cooper DeJean, whatever, and Philly took him. So they passed on Cooper DeJean at 36, and they passed on him again at 40 and traded back. Division rival. I mean, I saw people on Twitter comparing it to like the Bills trading with the Chiefs and letting them take Xavier Worthy. We'll see if Cooper DeJean ends up being Deion Sanders, they're going to regret it, obviously. But I think people are way too quick to react. I think the reactions now to the second and third round in totality are extremely positive. And what I saw in both the Newton pick and then the trade back, this team is broken, and we all need a reminder of that. They were 4-13 last year. They had an awful defense. Their offense was pretty damn bad. And Peters was so crystal clear every time he talked about having to rebuild through the draft. And part of rebuilding through the draft is also a volume play. So think about what he did with 40. They had 2 second-round picks. They were able to turn them into 3 second-round picks. They had 3 second-rounders. The last time that happened, I believe, and maybe I'm wrong, but I'm going off memory here, was the Malcolm Kelly, Devin Thomas, Fred Davis. And clearly that was a disaster, but take your brain all the way back to that point in time, and people were so fired up about having 3 second-round picks. That's what Peters was doing. He was getting more volume in a high-leverage situation. Second-rounders are important. And what we also learned, they were very clearly, especially with Newton, and then as we get further down, we'll go pick by pick, but I think what we learned a lot tonight is this was a straight best player available situation. They took Newton because they had him as a first rounder. Peter said, we were worried we might not be able to get him at 36. We were working the phones to maybe move up because he was that good and he can help us right away. And then when you see them trade out, he said, he's like, yeah, it's in the back of your mind to trade in the division. But he said Howie made a good offer, and we'll see what happens if Cooper tortures us down the line. That's reality. But I think it was very clear how big the rebuild job is here in Washington. And I think that is what drove this. And I think it's just a good reminder to not react in the moment and let things play out. Because I think now people are pretty darn happy with how everything went.
Yeah, and I think you see a similar theme throughout this day 2 of the draft. He wanted guys that were veteran guys, team leaders, captains, all
Totally.
And I think ultimately you're seeing the difference between having a real deal GM, which the Washington franchise hasn't really had in quite a while, and a real deal GM who is trying to build who's trying to build up an organization and isn't concerned about necessarily winning next year and trying to stopgap every little hole along the way, versus the coach-centric approach type thing that they were doing before, where you had Ron the coach being pulled in a different direction than Ron the GM because he was trying to win right away. So I understand the frustration about passing on tackles early, but I think you see how that played out in the draft, and the rest of the league that they were in the right direction in terms of waiting a little bit to go grab a tackle, because none of those guys that were left we're really true second round values.
All right, now we're going to get into draft by draft. We're going to go pick by pick. But I'm going to point out to the people, because I don't know that everybody knows it. Big man's playing hurt. He's developing a cough here. Maybe he's going to get through it. Maybe it's nothing. It might be the pollen, bro. The pollen's killing me right now. But if you need a pause or whatever, pause. We can figure it all out. You're playing hurt, and we appreciate it. So now we're going to go pick by pick, starting with Newton, second round, 36. There's a lot to like. You very rarely on draft night, and so I want to like kind of caution this. Like when the draft experts and the analysts start to weigh in, like there's a reason to like everybody, right? Like think about how many guys play college football and then how many guys get drafted and how few of those are in the second round, et cetera, et cetera. But Newton's a violent player. I loved his attitude when he got on with us. He used the phrase hella happy for getting picked, said, yeah, he's going to have a chip on his shoulder for not going in the first round. I think most people expected him to go in the first round. I also think there's a situation that you got to at least acknowledge. John Allen doesn't have guaranteed money on his deal this year. I don't think they're making a move with that at all. But you get another year down the road. He still doesn't have guaranteed money on his deal. The dead money versus cap savings becomes really advantageous. And again, as long as I think John might play better with reduced snaps, I think that's entirely possible. But John's probably going to want a new deal at some point. I don't know how much he's going to want to play with no guaranteed money. Like, I'm not expecting anything, calling anything. And I just don't want to get too far down that road with a guy that's been good to the city and matters and all that. But like, one of the problems with Rivera, the coach, and the GM was that at times those are like real perpendicular priorities, right? Yeah. Like the coach needs to worry about X, the GM needs to worry about the big picture. And I think Peters saw an opportunity to get what a lot of people say is a really violent, really disruptive interior pass rusher and run defender, like a true 3-down guy, and just look at what you've got. And right now it's like, we'll figure out a way to get him on the field. They ran that 5-man front a bunch last year. Who knows if they're going to run that? But like, good players get on the field, and that's not a concern for April. And I just think this was about a big picture, best player available, not need. And once you get to the second round, I don't know. You can make the argument that should always be BPA, but certainly that's what they went with, and you gotta examine that in its totality.
Yeah, I mean, you talked a lot about John Allen and Daron Payne, and the number of snaps they were playing, and I don't know that fans necessarily recognize how high that percentage was for those two guys, and over the course of an 18-game season, how much that wears them down as the season continues. And so I do think that bringing in another big body on the inside who can. I don't know if he's going to be the John Allen, Daron Payne type, but certainly he seems that way on tape, and listening to these guys describe him, that's kind of what it sounds like. And, we don't know if they're going to play a 3-man front, a 4-man front, what it's going to look like. But the more
I think it's going to be a 4-3. I think it'll be a 4-man front most of the time.
Right. But the more rotation you can get in there with players at depth who can help out right away is important. And you see them, rebuilding this roster. Like, you mentioned Fedarian Mathis earlier and John Ridgway. Who knows what Fedarian is? He hasn't been healthy enough to know. John Ridgway is a very nice player and certainly a roster filler outer and guy who can step in and help you out. But he's not exactly the most explosive player in the world. And particularly when you get with John and Daron a little bit worn down, and then you have to bring in, a Ridgway type, you allow offensive lines to start shifting towards the more explosive pass rushers or the more explosive playmakers. And so the more playmakers you have on the inside that you can continue to rotate in and out helps a lot along the way. And having a good D-line, a strong D-line, especially an interior D-line, helps the next level, helps the linebackers. The linebackers then help the DBs secondary. So it's not the most sexy or exciting pick because it feels like they're strengthening a position that they've already spent a ton of draft capital on. But between the John Allen contract and kind of the dearth of playmakers behind John and Daron, I think this is a prudent pick.
All right, so we don't have to go this in depth on every pick, or we're going to be up.
No, certainly not. We'll be here forever.
4 in the morning. Newton is 6'2", 3 bills. The comp I've heard is like a Grady Jarrett type. He helps your team. I think if you look at what the Eagles have done, they build the trenches, they reinforce the trenches. Peter said in the post presser, whatever the hell that's called. In San Fran, we always valued stacking up D linemen. I get it, especially as you watched everything unfold. So then you get to 40 where they traded out of, and yep, Cooper DeJean went right there. He may come back to bite them in the ass at 41. Kool-Aid McKinstry from Bama, who I liked a lot, went. So they did not take their corner, but they did trade down to 50. And I want to give you credit. I'm going to let you have the floor to talk about your guy as long as you want, because I may go make another drink. But at 50, they take the kid Mike Sainristil. And I just want to read this from Nick Saban on the broadcast about the Michigan corner, who was also a captain. He said, this guy may be, pound for pound, the best football player in this draft. And Sainristil later said to us, he's willing to do whatever it takes. He takes hard coaching. He clearly seems like a coach's dream. And I get you want Cooper, and this dude's undersized. And maybe he's going to play the slot, but he might play it really well. Peter said they're going to call it the star. So there's our new term we've learned tonight. Big man, you nailed this in our Beltway football mock draft. Now, the numbers were different, but you had them taking him with the 40th pick. They were able to move back and get him. But you nailed this. You identified him as somebody they'd like. Tell us why. Take your victory lap. And take your time, because I'm going to make it.
I got you. I liked him a lot pre-draft just because he was a veteran. He was a team leader. He was the captain of that Michigan defense that just went out and won a national championship. Adam Peters said he felt like he was the heart and soul of that Michigan team, and obviously JJ McCarthy played a big part in all that. But I love you can tell that that's the type of player that this group wants. And he's a guy who goes out and makes big plays at big times. And he had 6 interceptions last year, the biggest of which was the soul snatching 81-yard pick 6 that he had in the national championship game off of Mike Penix to kind of, put that game away for them. But talking to Adam Peters tonight, it wasn't just his work on the defensive side that he was super excited about. He talked about how at the Michigan Pro Day, he did all the defensive drills and then came out and he was one of the best ones doing the receiver drills because he started off in college as a wide receiver and made that move to DB. And, you like a guy who can help you out both in the kick return game, punt return game, DB, who knows, if they ever decide to play him as play him on the offensive side of the ball, whatever that may be. But he's a guy that has stamina all day. He can run, he can play. And if you can lead a group of men like the Michigan defense was, that says a lot about you as a person and your leadership skills and style. And if astute listeners of the pod have known that that's something that I've talked about that's been missing in this Commanders locker room for the past few years. And I don't know that he's going to step right in and be your vocal team leader, but he is a guy that has been there and done that before, and that goes a long way in terms of helping bring a group together.
And good for you for identifying that. You have always talked about player leadership. I think you look at Harbaugh and you look at the way that Michigan team played. Hell yeah, that guy's got it. We got to talk to him. You could hear it. Joel Klatt, rather, from Fox Sports, was on the NFL Network broadcast. He said he said of Sainristil, he's the best defender on the best defense in college football. And you got to like that. For the folks that want to make a Forbes comparison, listen, Sainristil's 5'9", 182. I believe Forbes is like 6'1", 160. I don't think that's much of a comp, frankly. Especially Forbes kind of speed outside guy. They're going to play this dude inside. They're listing Forbes at 6', 180. Neither of those are true. I believe the 5'9", 180 of Sainristil a lot more. I think, again, it's like people were freaking out they didn't take Kool-Aid or DeJean or Dijon. And then when you get 10 picks later and you add 53, okay, you really like Sainristil. And people loved it. And, dude, for Saban to say that, I'm in on.
One
All right.
before we go on to Sinnott, one more thing. Just the next pick after Sainristil was Patrick Hall, who went to the Dolphins. He's a left tackle and offensive tackle. The one caveat that I would put to that is that you got to remember that the Dolphins have a left-handed quarterback, so you can have a left tackle that is a little bit more of a project because it's not a blind side. It's not the blind side for him. I know fans are upset about the offensive tackle situation. We're going to get to Brandon Coleman that I'm pretty excited about, but just take it with a grain of salt that the very next pick was, maybe the top left tackle that was left potentially. But the fact that he's going to a team with a left-handed quarterback makes a difference for kind of projecting him out in terms of ability to play right away and help out.
You're riding high, and you're right about going to Miami, where he's protecting the lefty and Tua. He was not the next pick. He went after Sinnott, and he was
okay.
It's late, man. You got a
Yeah.
cough. We're all getting through it. Now, so that's your Sainristil pick. Now that was 250. Now you got 253. They take the kid from K-State, Ben Sinnott. We're not. Let's be honest. None of us are really sure how to say this name. Sinnott.
No, he said it. Sinnott is the
Sinnott.
correct.
So not Sinnott and not Snot, certainly Sinnott. I'm friends with this dude, Marcus Washington. Shout out to the Washington Jesuit Academy, a great service-minded organization in DC that helps young men kind of go through school and get to great high schools and get to great jobs and colleges and all sorts of stuff. Marcus is the executive director or president or something of WJA, but he's also an absolute draft nut. And I want to credit Marcus because we had him on the radio on Thursday, and he called Ben Sinnott to Washington. And I've been saying, if you listen to the pods, how much I trust in Peters to identify a tight end. I knew they had to get one. I wasn't sure that it would come in the second. I thought it might come later. The kid I talked about was Theo Johnson. We both talked about lots of them. They clearly identified this guy. Peters talked later about him as in San Francisco, we had a mindset for what we wanted. Use check Kittle, like you see the type of person, player, body type. He didn't want to make a comp to those guys, but Sinnott is 6'4", 250, versatile as hell, a mean blocker, and he can play kind of an H-back for you. Like he can do a lot of different things. Ertz is not the long-term answer here. Now, if you're into the projections and the rankings, maybe you could have gotten him later, but I'm a firm, especially after like the top 10, take your guy. Just take your guy. And this was their guy. I like it. The notes I made on Sinnott, I love the durability on this kid. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not going to check how many games Kansas State played every year, but my guess is he played every game. He played 12 games so I guess he redshirted as a freshman, played 12 games his redshirt freshman year, 14 games his sophomore year, and then this past year he played 12 games, 49 catches, 676 yards, 6 touchdowns. I think he helps you. I think he helps Jaden Daniels. I just when we talked to him, he was super excited. Yes. I love Peters talking about like the San Fran model for these guys because dude, everybody gets so caught up in. I love how Doc mocks this. People are like, "Oh, we got to innovate on offense." The hell and I'm quoting Doc. You don't have to innovate anything. You have to blow people off the line of scrimmage and go down the field. And that's the San Francisco mindset. That's Kyle Shanahan. That's Mike Shanahan. Now, was it more finesse at one point? Sure. Finesse might not even be right. Was it different in the zone blocking scheme? Yes. But you watch San Fran, and they are nasty at the line of scrimmage. This kid is that mold, and I like this one a lot.
Yeah, me too. I'll be quick with him. What's the Barstool Sports gives away the best fullback award, which is called
the Low Man Trophy.
The Low Man Trophy, and he was the winner, I guess, last year. Listen, I think he's going to be as good of a blocker as John Bates is for this team, but much more athletic in the pass game. Honestly, maybe I'm wrong, and you can tell me that if you hate this comp. Kind of looks like and reminds me of what Chris Cooley was. A guy who you can kind of use as a gadget in a bunch of different ways offensively, but also doesn't mind getting his nose dirty and stick it in there and make a big block in the run game.
I think we'll see. And I think fans will go crazy with that. So I want to be careful because Chris was really, really great at yak at like yards after the catch.
Yeah.
Nobody can break it down.
That
I
dead
think
leg, that dead leg was unstoppable.
I think I don't know. We'll see. I don't hate it. I also love that he wore 34 in college. I kind of hope he wears a random 30s number. We'll see how that all works out. And I don't want to get into numbers because Lord knows everybody's obsessed with what Jaden's going to do. Which, if I had to guess, is going to be number 5, and Tress ends up happily compensated. I think we both like the Sinnott pick. I don't know what you want to do here. If we want to pick a favorite second round and then a favorite third round, if we want to pick a favorite Friday night, we could also do that next week and go round by round and pick favorites.
Yeah,
we're kind of reacting in the moment.
We have 2 more picks to go. I think let's just finish up with Brandon Coleman and then look.
Okay. So then we get to the third round, and shout out to the big man because we were all kind of losing our minds, and we were filling up water bottles, taking a leak. We were talking it through, and I was like, all right, well, the next pick's not till 100. We got a lot of time. And big man's like, no, they still have 67. And I'm like, oh, yeah, you're right. So for the world that was super concerned about the left tackle, and I want to be clear, I'm not so sure this is the answer, but everybody was freaked out. They hadn't taken any offensive linemen, and that was a fair concern. At third round, number 67, they take this kid, Brandon Coleman, who they liked. They visited with him. He talked about it when we got to talk to him. One thing I don't understand here is he played some tackle. He played a good amount of tackle at TCU. He was another team captain. A lot of projections say he could be a guard. Maybe his best fit is at guard. I think he's got the arm length to play tackle. And Adam Peters said we view him as a tackle. But one thing that's funky to me is we can't get a read on this dude's height. And, we'll see him in person in 2 weeks at the rookie minicamp. So ESPN lists him at 6'6", 320. His NFL.com combine page lists him at 6'4.5". And I know Dane Brugler in The Beast had him at 6'3" and change. So at some point, we're going to need like a big man. But how tall are you?
6'4".
All right. Like, we're going to need you to like sneak up next to him and just get an idea of the actual height, because we both know how height gets measured in various ways. And that's not the end of the world, but it is a factor on the edge at tackle, but he does have the long arms, which helps. I think you really like him. There's a nastiness to him. They're clearly view him as a tackle. If I had to guess, they're going to have some hesitation to be like, yeah, that's our left tackle of the future. He's going to be in charge of Jaden's blind side. But they also really like him, and they made a point of getting him. It's a guy you got to love the story. He was born in Northern Virginia, I believe. Moved to Germany as a very young guy. College Football Reference has him listed at 6'6", 317. But this is a dude that started 11 games last year, 14 games the year before. You got to like the toughness, the durability. I loved his attitude. Look, I say this on the radio all the time. Like, if you look ugly in your senior prom pictures, you're just ugly. When we talk to these guys moments after they've been drafted, they're all excited and eager and everything. And if they weren't, there's a big problem. But he totally fits the mold of what Peters and Quinn have said, the guys they're going after, what they want in their players. I like it. I don't know that, your third rounder. I don't know that 67 is your answer at left tackle. But when you see good teams all over the NFL, their O-line often consists of guys that are Friday and Saturday picks. And they're developed well, and they're coached well, and they learn to kick ass. And I think that's what, if you're a Commanders fan, you're hoping is going to happen
here. Yeah, he's certainly not a player that's going to step right in and be a starting left tackle. But I think once you got past Jordan Morgan, there wasn't a starting left tackle really there in the draft. And so I think Jane Slater said they were trying to move up to take Tyler Guyton, which obviously would have been, an interesting pick. Once Jordan Morgan went, there was no reason to rush to take any of these offensive tackles, because you see the rest of the league kind of agreed, and it took until later in the second round, third round, before these guys started coming off the board. I said to JP before we started this pod, the longer that I let this Brandon Coleman pick kind of settle in, the more I like it. He has more than 1,600 starts at tackle. I'm very curious to
1,600 snaps.
Sorry, snaps. I'm
Sorry.
very interested to read more / find out kind of what the reasoning or why he moved inside the guard after having a pretty good, I guess, 2 seasons ago, a pretty good year. But at the end of the day, if you're a measurables guy and you want to draft players who fit the mold of what a position should be, Brandon Coleman fits the mold. And I kind of like the idea when you look kind of big picture at this draft. You see Adam Peters picking players who kind of fit the mold, and now he's leaving it in the hands of the coaches to mold these guys into the players that he wants them to be. And when you look at some of the measurables from Coleman, 35-inch vertical, regularly runs 18 miles an hour, squats 600 pounds, benches 400, power cleans 375. Those numbers are pretty impressive. I was doing a little bit of pod math right before we went on. He's 6'4", has 35-inch arms and a 35-inch vertical. That means he can one-handed reach up and probably get to about 12 and a half feet, which is almost the top of an NBA backboard. This dude weighs 320 pounds and is almost able to touch the top of an NBA backboard. To me, that's wild athleticism, and that gives you a real framework with which you can work to mold this guy into the player you want him to be. I think right now we're looking at Cornelius Lucas being your starter on the left side, Andrew Wiley being your starter on the right side, and it'll depend on how Coleman develops. If he's super quick, picking it up, maybe he takes over a starting role, before the season. But more than likely, you're probably looking at getting, 4, 6, 8 games out of, Cornelius Lucas, and then you can kind of get a feel for where he is. But I think we can look at kind of almost a direct comparison to Jaden Daniels last year, who they drafted in the 4th round and was nowhere close to being ready to play. Didn't have any of the particular measurables for a tackle that gets you excited about what he can be. And, we'll see Brandon Coleman when he gets on the field and see what he's got. JP, you wanted me to sneak up next to him. I assure you, men my size don't do much sneaking, but I will be talking. There'll be plenty of opportunity to go back to back and see what the height Mets out to. But it's late on day 2 of the draft, and I'm trying to keep my excitement reasonable. But the more that I read about him, the more that I watch clips of cut-ups of him from some of the different gurus and reading about what some other people are saying, the more excited I am about who he potentially could turn into. And at the end of the day, and I think you can say that for a couple of these guys that they drafted, a lot of this is going to fall on the shoulders of the coaches to get these guys coached up and ready to step in and play. And you want to talk about a big project for Bobby Johnson to step in right away. He's got a pet project that he's going to be able to put his fingerprints on.
Yeah, I was going to bring up Bobby Johnson too. There was of all these coaches they hired, that was one of the biggest question marks. It's like, Bobby Johnson just got fired by the Giants. They're kind of a mess, but if you look at what they did in Buffalo, it was really good. Here you go, dude. Let's see if you can figure that out. And then specific to Jaden Daniels, I think we both were calling for him to get the fake IR spot because they didn't think he was the guy. Like he just wasn't ready. He's listed on the Commanders' website as 6'4", 297. I'd love to know how many tackles in the NFL are under 3 bills. And maybe he's added a lot of weight and muscle. I don't know. You hate to think they're punting on a 4th round pick from last year. That's the old regime, and it was a guy that nobody understood when it happened. And we'll see. Maybe he shows up to camp a cut up beast, and he's 325. Like, we'll see. He had a redshirt year in the NFL, basically. But of Coleman, I got this stat from the PFF Commanders in 1,307 pass blocking snaps at TCU. He only allowed 54 quarterback pressures and 3 sacks. So the stuff is good. It took them a long time to get a tackle, a dude that some say should be a guard that they think. Peters was unequivocal about that. He's like, yeah, he's a tackle. Like Peters was very clear that Sainristil, your guy, is a slot, and that this dude is a tackle. And so I'm like, all right, like they clearly have. Like, there's no talk of position. So they know what they want these guys to do.
But real quick, Ron
Go ahead.
Rivera poisoned the word position flex, and to me, if they have a clear vision for what this kid can be, that's an important piece of the whole puzzle. What was the problem with the position flex thing was they were trying to teach multiple players multiple positions, and ultimately that hindered their growth across the board. Is it
So a quick
because
exercise?
real quick, just
No, go ahead.
for whoever does the relative athletic score RAS, Brandon Coleman ranked. They have him as a guard, but they had him ranked 4th out of 1,450 guard prospects from 1987 to 2024 in terms of the relative athletic score. And so I think that's just to how good his measurables are.
It's pretty freaking strong. A quick exercise for the oh my god they didn't get a tackle crowd. Right now they took Johnny Newton. Jerzon Newton, I think is his official name. He seems like he goes by Johnny. We've learned over the years with Commanders draft picks that sometimes we get told different things with their names down the road. I don't want to be his real government name is Jerzon Newton. It sounds like he goes by Johnny. So they take him at 36. Now another lineman didn't go off the board. Now they had 40, they traded out of it. But if you're just looking, the next lineman that goes off the board, and I'm just scrolling here, right? So Johnny Newton at 36, they trade out of 40. They then pick at 50. They take Sainristil. Then they pick Sinnott at 53. The first lineman is your boy Paul. And I think you and I are kind of split on him. I was never that high on him. Then Blake Fisher goes 59. So that's a true tackle, a Notre Dame kid. Then you get a little bit. Roger Rosengarten, who I know you liked, goes 62. I think he's a real tackle. Sumatea, the BYU kid, who there's a lot of questions about. There's a lot of questions about the dude with him. Now he goes to Kansas City. Andy Reid's a BYU guy. You got Mahomes, Kelsey, Chris Jones. You have serious leadership there. Andy Reid over the years has shown a willingness to take guys with question marks and be able to get them to buy in. And that's why he's going to the Hall of Fame, frankly. So, but for all the people that are freaking out, there were only 3 linemen taken, right? There were only 3 linemen taken in that second round, and they were all well after 36 and even 40 where they were originally slated to draft. And they even came after 50 and 53. So obviously, Adam Peters' draft board that I'm willing to trust, and I believe you are, they didn't pass over anybody they wanted. Now you get into the 3rd round, and they go. Obviously, they go Coleman, the 3rd pick in the 3rd round. So and then Caden Wallace goes right after Coleman. It was another lineman, but you can easily make the case they identified that the guy we want is going to be available at 67. So we're going to trade back and get the guys we want on our board. And Adam Peters said at various times his phone was going crazy. It was kind of chaotic. And of course, they were wheeling and dealing and maybe looking to go up, maybe looking to go back. But Coleman's a guy they met with a bunch. He talked about that in his presser. I think they did exactly what they wanted there, frankly.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think it was a calculated draft. I think you saw them, have their targets, and they looked to move up when they were concerned about the targets not being there and stuck, where they needed to when the right trade wasn't there. I think you're seeing a very calculated draft out of this group.
All right, so then I tell you what, big man, you imagine if they had traded up for Johnny Newton from 36 to 34. Fans were in that moment on Twitter was a hellscape. Now I think things are pretty cool. Last pick of the night, the Friday night, which was just terrific that they had the 100th pick. Everybody in the media room was joking around that we'll all throw in $10 if they could just trade up or trade back so we didn't have to wait around till pick 100. But whatever they did, they take Luke McCaffrey, The pedigree is obviously pretty incredible. His father, Ed, won 2 Super Bowls with the Broncos. Everybody knows what Christian McCaffrey is in the NFL. Adam, Adam Peters was with the Niners when they traded for Christian McCaffrey. That Peters even joked that Christian was loudly encouraging Peters to take Luke. I think you got no questions about the dude or the work ethic. You agree with that part?
Totally agree. You have a guy who
Right.
averaged a touchdown a game. He's
Right. And
another guy that knows how to get in the end zone.
this part, so he had 13 TDs this past year for Rice. Listen, Rice ain't great, but Rice is probably better than you think. And I think Luke went there as a quarterback, eventually switched to wide out. This past season at Rice, 71 catches, 992 yards, 13 touchdowns. The pedigree is obviously off the charts. He knows the family. And dude, I can't help but notice this. There are other wideouts they could have gone after. But if you just look at the wideouts on the Washington roster, he immediately, of the guys I expect to make the team, he's the tallest guy they'd have. The only guy that's listed taller than him is Bryson Tremaine, who was a practice squatter that was kind of on and off the roster, didn't suit up in any game. Tremaine is 6'4". The next tallest dude they have is Tinsley, the Penn State kid, who was undrafted, made the roster. But, like, of the guys we expect to play, you're talking about De'Ami Brown. They listed 6 foot. He's about my height. Dotson's shorter than I am. Terry's probably a little taller than me, but, like, they don't have a taller guy. McCaffrey gives them that. And then you also have the name. You never want to judge somebody by their last name, but, like, in this instance, I think the last name is helpful. Like, because you can count on who they are as people.
Yeah, I mean, I think you see, we talked about the captainship and the leadership. He's another guy that does that. Bryce obviously is a very good academic school kid with a good head on his shoulders. They clearly had a type, and I think he fit it. And I also think that he's somebody who can step in and do something like you talked about, a little bit different than what the Commanders have in their starting receivers. And so, just another type of safety valve help for Jaden Daniels, another guy who has shown the propensity to be able to get open and has good size and speed and good movement skills. And I think that the fact that Adam Peters knows Christian and knows his family as well as he does only speaks to the type of person that he is, and clearly that was very important for these guys.
All right, so those are your 5. You go Newton, Sainristil, Sinnott, Coleman, McCaffrey. I mean, if you're just thinking positions, you can argue about D tackle not being need. I think that's clearly a BPA. Trading out of there, I think, is clearly BPA. They needed a corner. If you listen to Adam Peters, they answered slot corner, which has been a big problem. They needed a tight end. They got that. They needed a tackle. They think they got one. And they needed a receiver with some size. And I think McCaffrey's a slot guy, but a 6'2" slot guy is pretty damn interesting, especially in the red zone. We've been going a while here, and I think most Commanders fans are really excited about the draft. I think, dude, we're always excited about the draft. So, like, you don't want to – I want to temper expectations. I circle everything back to Jaden. I think this is all about Jaden. If he's the guy, then this is the best draft they've had in 30 years. But I like everything else. Anything you're looking for on Sunday, things are going to get wacky on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, once you get to
Saturday.
Once you get to day 3 of the draft, you're kind of throwing darts at a dartboard. But I think we've seen, this group has a plan, and they're going to stick to it and take the type of guys that they want to take. I think, I'd like to see some more additions on the offensive line. I'd like to see another tackle come in, maybe a little more help on the inside. But at the end of the day, you can see them trying to rebuild a roster that needs to be rebuilt. And, obviously everyone wants to win right away and win next year, but they're not, sacrificing the future to go get guys that are going to help them maybe get an extra win or two this season.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Of course, you want more linemen. No 4th rounder Their next pick, as it's currently constituted, is in the 5th, 139. Then they also have in the 5th, 161. 161, I think, is the one they picked up from Philly. In the 6th, they have, I'm scrolling, so forgive me. I don't think they have a 6th, right?
I don't believe
And
so.
then, yeah, and then in the 7th, 222, and that's just their pick. There's probably going to be some movement. If you had to guess, that's usually what happens on Saturday. I think this was a hell of a pod, Mitch. I think we both, at least I took a bunch of notes. I know you have a steel trap mind. I do not. Where it's Friday night, or I guess it's Saturday morning. It's 12:48 a.m. If you're a Commanders fan, listen to this. I think you should be. I'm pleased. I think they're building the team they want with the recognition. This is going to take a little while. They're trying to just get the best guys they can in there. I think we've already seen a lot of it. I think there's going to be a good amount of roster turnover, and that's good. They were 4-13 without any Pro Bowlers. Like, you got to turn this thing over to build for the future. Again, though, Jaden's the biggest piece. Jaden's the biggest piece.
Absolutely. Jaden's the biggest piece.
Did you ever you remember the Chris Rock stand up when his dad would come home and his mom would flip out. She's like, who ate the big piece of chicken? Who ate the big piece of chicken? The big piece of chicken's for your father. He's coming home. And sometimes his mom would have to pretend and make 2 pieces of chicken into one for the dad to have the big piece of chicken. Jaden is the big piece of chicken. And we can get caught up in everything that happens and all the minutia. And if you're still freaking out about a tackle, I understand you probably have high blood pressure. I think they've added a lot of players. They're now 6 players in through 3 rounds. That should be a lot of talent, and I think you should be pleased.
Yeah, I just wanted to do 2 quick shout outs. Our guy Phil Betts up in Detroit, who was asking about us up there. Unfortunately, we weren't up there. We were in Ashburn.
With Tim Meek.
Yeah, with Tim Meek.
Shout out to a lot of people have reached out to us from Detroit. Looks like that's an awesome time. I hope you're enjoying yourself.
Yeah. And then also just want to shout out our guy Scott DeFife.
The glass guy?
He's my glass guy. He agrees with me that drinks are best out of glass, not plastic.
Well, I read his email, and he's clearly very educated on glass.
Yes.
And, you are right that drinks are better. Like an ice-cold glass bottle of any drink, grape soda, anything, is the best. My point was it's hard to get and all that. And my man DeFife explained that, there's all these hurdles, and I understand it. But appreciate you listening, Glass Man.
Yeah, and I appreciate you reaching out, bud. Thank you. And now this.
What do we got?
What's that? We're going to Jaden Daniels presser in full, which starts with Adam Peters introducing Jaden. Then you'll have about 8 to 10 minutes of Jaden Daniels, and then after that we have the head coach Dan Quinn and his availability and what he's seen out of the draft and what he's looking for as they start moving towards organized team activities.
I love it. I think you and I were super locked in. I think this was a really, really, forgive me, I'm just going to say fucking great podcast. And I'm going to be at National Harbor Saturday. The weather looks like it kind of sucks. So wear a coat if you're listening to this and you're coming. Also, if you see me and you want to say hi, just say hi. I always prefer to just say hi and then kind of awkwardly look at each other. And listen, this podcast was fantastic. So listen to it twice and tell your friends. Big man, maybe we do Saturday evening, Sunday. We'll figure that out. Feel better. Take care of that cough. Walk hard.
Will do. We also, don't forget, Beltway football on TV, 10 a.m. and 11 a.m. on Saturday morning, which is, I guess, Sunday. Actually technically today, and then Sunday as well. And you'll get the best of the Beltway football pod on TV.
Yeah, watch it. Damn it. Here comes Jaden. You made it this far. Mitch owes you a cough drop.